Hi everyone, welcome to season 3 of the Power Within podcast. I took a break there for 9 months to recharge, reset, and go again. And part of the inspiration for season 3 is my attendance at the third annual Irish Hypnotherapy Conference, which took place last weekend up at the Clayton Hotel, Liffey Valley in Dublin. And I ended up getting a lot of potential guests for the podcast. And I'm starting off here today with a fantastic guest. His name is Mark Richardson. He's based in Dalkey in Dublin, Dalkey Hypnotherapy. Now, I know Mark a couple of years now. I actually met Mark at the first Irish Hypnotherapy conference. Mark is a great guy. He's very knowledgeable, experienced, and he knows his stuff. And I'm really looking forward to having a great conversation and discussion with him today on the podcast. And I hope you're going to enjoy it as well. So, without any further ado, let's bring on Mark. Mark, how are you, my friend? It's great to have you on the
Oh, yeah.
podcast.
Thanks for having me on, Trevor.
You're very welcome. And I know I just mentioned that I met you 2 years ago, just under 2 years ago at the first Irish Hypnotherapy conference. And since then, we've been in touch and we've met at a couple of events in the meantime. And I've always had really interesting conversations with you. So would you like to start off? I suppose a good starting point would be, would you like to tell us a little bit about your story, about how you got into hypnotherapy and start doing the work that you're doing?
Yeah, well, I got into it almost by accident in the fact that I was involved in a school reunion. I met up with one of the guys that I've known for, well, too long, 50 odd years. And I asked him what he's doing now. And he said, "Oh, I'm a hypnotherapist." This is in the UK, the reunion.
Sure.
And was he wasn't the kind of person I really expected to be running a therapy clinic. And he told me all about it. And I looked up, as you do, on Google and found out that there was a taster weekend, as it were, in City West the following weekend. So I
Right.
went to, met a few other people that were interested, and it took off from there, really. So did all the training, so on and so forth, qualified, and sat back for a bit, and then I opened my clinic in fact, it's 6 years as of last week. So it was the first week in April 2019.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And is there any particular niche areas of expertise that you've gotten into in that
Uh,
time frame?
there's a lot of work related people coming from the workplace to me. In the broadest sense, anxiety related, a lot of work related stress,
Right.
uh,
Sure.
imposter syndrome type scenarios, um, other issues work related where people are under so much pressure they're turning to alcohol and drugs to sort of sate themselves.
Sure.
Um,
Sure. And
I do deal with the routine stuff, sort of people wanting to stop smoking and things like that. Quite a few people, they're involved, obviously because of the tech industry in Dublin and so on. A lot of online presentations, things like that, where they're probably lacking confidence, and they want a little bit of help in that area.
Sure,
Um,
sure. You're saying
but
your
those are
particular passion, like we're speaking before you come on, your particular passion
yeah,
is to work with people from the the business world, the corporate world that have, as you mentioned, like have gotten into bad habits and addictions and feel that they're under like a lot of pressure and trying to hide
yeah,
that then when they go home and it's creating a multitude of problems, isn't it?
yeah. A lot of the big multinational corporations that are fairly local to here. Um, there's a lot of pressure to meet targets. And there's a lot of sort of a cool thing on the outside. They all go to work in jeans and t-shirts, and there's breakout
Yeah,
room and all this kind of stuff. And then you just scratch under the
yeah.
surface, and
It's all a facade.
yeah, it's kind of
Yeah.
a bit of smoke and mirrors going off there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
yeah, so that would be a typical sort of demographic of clients that I would see purely because of where I'm based. That's
sure.
um,
Sure. And in what way would you help them?
so we deal with a lot of, as I say, anxiety in its broadest terms. They don't feel comfortable in where they are and what they're doing. It's affecting their relationships. Quite a lot of people involved in the tech industry in Dublin, they're not from Dublin. In fact, quite a lot are from overseas. And so they feel very estranged from their own network. So
Yeah,
there's all issues associated with that.
sure. I know from experience in the corporate world, I used to work in Dublin folks in Ericsson and Clonskeagh back in the noughties and or the late 90s, early zero zeros. And, definitely even back then, it was very much, it's like I'm from the country myself.
Yeah.
And, the commuting to work and the traffic back then. But I know now it can tend to be like it's very intense surroundings. It's not easy to kind of get that kind of peace and calm
Yeah.
in that kind of zone,
Yeah.
in
And
that corporate
there's quite a
zone.
few clients that I've seen, if you wanted one word to sum them up, I mean, they're quite lonely, really.
Right.
Their ratings are great, the career pattern's great, they're highly qualified, but they just feel sort of lost.
Yeah.
And obviously they have quite a bit of time alone as well to stew on all this, stew on the
Yeah.
juices. And, then they end up in a circle of bad behavior or unwanted behavior, be a better description. Yeah.
Sure. And some of it is, as we mentioned, like habits and addictions that they can hide a mass, such as cocaine, isn't it? Cocaine
Yeah.
is the big problem now in Ireland, in Dublin, I suppose, more so.
Yeah. And one of my intake that I would be doing with clients on the first occasion I see them, and I just asked them a direct question. Are they using drugs and so on and so forth, and quite often you'll get a no. There's a hesitation there, so quite often
Yeah. Yeah.
there's something going off, but they don't admit to it straight away, and then you scratch a bit, dig a bit deeper, and they say, well, actually, yeah, do coke on the weekends, and and if I'm somewhere where somebody else has got some, and away we
Yeah.
go.
So definitely they're high income, like
Yeah,
drug users, really.
income, highly educated, a lot of them. Um, you know,
Yeah. And what do you think the reasons are for turning to kind of those bad habits and addictions and
it's
so
just
on?
a lot of them. I say they feel lonely. They can't really see where the future's going. Um, I've
Mm.
I've dealt with quite a few, particularly females, in the career is going brilliant. Okay, they're probably in their early to mid 30s, and they're single. They're living in a very nice apartment, city centre, whatever. They might even be sharing with other people, and they go, and you can see where this is going. The old biological clock's ticking, and nothing's happening. And they're saying, well, the career's great, the money's great, etc.
Yeah,
is great, but they can't really see where they're going to be in 5 years, 10 years.
sure,
What's coming down
sure,
the line. Well, a lot of the time they're on short contracts.
sure.
So there's no guaranteed future. They find it fairly difficult um, getting involved in relationships, quite a lot of them.
Right. Yeah.
So, all this kind of gets put into the mix.
Yeah, I
And
remember when I qualified for I have a degree in quality management, and I went to Dublin, done the course in Dublin, Brewer Street in Dublin, and then Sligo IT, but I ended up in working in Dublin, as I said, in Ericsson mobile phones out in Clonskee. And the early days of that, when you're kind of out of college and you're enthusiastic and you're really motivated to succeed,
mm,
they were great the first half a dozen years. But then my memory is the last half a dozen years from working in that environment was very, then you realize that, you that whole routine of the like whole 9 to 5 and, is this what life is all about? Like
mm,
I tend to as well found that, I was arriving in the car park and you're almost putting a mask on, to go in there, like you're,
exactly.
you're playing a role for the
Yeah,
day, and then you're coming home and you're being your real self then back in the car on
yeah,
the way home.
yeah,
And that can be very energy sapping,
yeah.
over a
Lots of
long period
different,
of time.
yeah, lots of different hats, but some of the hats don't fit very well.
A lot of different hats, yeah, exactly. A lot of different hats, and that's my experience of the corporate world. Then the whole thing that they don't teach you in college.
Yeah,
Saying the right words, right things at the right time to the right people and licking the right arses. Sorry.
yeah,
But that's all part of the pressure, isn't it? To, keep this persona where you're kind of that career focused orientation to get up that ladder and achieve and the pressure that comes with that.
yeah,
And
yeah.
especially
Definitely.
management is like, that's that big pressure for managers in big companies, big organizations. But
Yeah,
which is why I found as well. I don't know if you've seen. I've working with local companies here in Waterford to
I
help
saw
them
that.
reduce stress and help them to improve their health and well-being. It's a
Yeah,
big thing for productivity and many other things because like a happier person in the workplace is a happier person outside and then vice versa.
yeah.
It's
And they're
very
not
hard
running.
to differentiate the two. I don't know if you've seen the TV series Severance. Have you seen that TV series?
No, sorry.
Yeah, well, it's on. I seen it there recently, and I don't know, folks, if you've heard about Severance, go and have a look. This is 2 seasons of it. It's quite recent. I think the first season was maybe a year or two ago, and the current season was I think just finished. And it's about it's supposed to be set. It's a kind of a sci-fi thing, but it's supposed to be set in the future. But it's like it's eerie. Like there's a lot of the truths about the modern world we live in, and what they've
Yeah,
done is that they've had this device where they can place in your brain. So when you go to work, you become a different person. And the person that you go and work for 8 hours a day, right? And on the way out, then they remove the chip, and the person in work is called an innie, and the person outside work is called an outie. It's the same person, the same body,
yeah,
but they live completely separate and different lives, And the person, the outie, takes a conscious choice to have it done because they just want to go in. They don't want to remember anything that happened during the workday. And it's kind of scary, really. But yeah, so definitely worth checking out.
yeah.
Definitely worth checking out. And I think like a lot of people have that problem too. that work-life balance to be happy both in work and outside work as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's a trickle down effect with a lot of this. I had a client a couple of years ago now who's actually a director in one of the big, well, household name tech companies in the city, very highly on the board. And because she is under so much pressure with work, such long hours, such stress, it trickles down now and it's affecting her children because they're not seeing her, and then, so on and so, there's obviously some dynamics going off within the house, within the
Sure.
home. That's a trickle down effect from her high flying job, and that's not unusual.
Yeah.
That
So if you're
the
helping her,
dominate.
sorry, Mark, if you're helping that lady, like in what ways are you helping her? Are you helping her to kind of like change her mindset, her perspective on
Yeah,
things?
and just probably see things in a slightly different way.
Yeah,
Uh, you know, um, I think you see she's obviously from an Irish legal background and working for essentially US based companies. They've got a different ethos, different way of doing things. And it's, you've got to fit their way. They're not going to fit you, you
yeah,
know. So that's where the kind of pressure comes on, adapting really her mindset to what was expected of her within that corporation.
yeah, sure.
So yeah,
Good stuff, good stuff. And what other areas would you be passionate about? What makes you tick in terms of like how you help people in your practice?
Was it when we were talking earlier? I think one of the good things regarding therapists that I know and myself is bringing yourself into the therapy room, and the fact that the majority of therapists that we would know in our circle of people that would meet at conference and so on,
Yeah, sure.
they tend to be, let's say, a bit more middle-aged. It wouldn't be their first career, and there's an advantage in obviously or bringing that experience and to the therapy room, so you can relate to your client, so when they actually say, I've got this issue, that issue, because you're a little bit more mature, you've got some empathy with them and say, yeah, but that's something I've got experience with, or I can relate to where you're coming from. Whereas
Yeah,
in some other areas of, let's say, the medical profession, this isn't a criticism, but that's all they've done. They've gone to college, qualified, and see their clients, but they've no
mm,
broader
yeah,
experience in the wider world. So I think that's an advantage that we've got, is that a breadth and depth of experience away from the therapy room.
that's it exactly. And it's that authenticity that, is very important, isn't it, when we work with our clients,
Yeah,
that we can, relate to them and that in that way, rather than, like if you're just, no disrespect to somebody just out of college, folks, but if you're, I know I've been there myself, you think, they have the piece of paper in your hand and you think, yeah, you know it all at that
yeah,
point. But as you said, like, life experience is something that is priceless, that like you can't buy and you can't get in college.
yeah,
You can have all the awards and the different certifications on the wall, but it's, have you been there, done that, and worn the t-shirt in terms of, it's okay to open up and go, look, we're human too, right?
yes,
And we know what it feels like to be at a low ebb, for example, and to
yeah,
experience stress and anxiety, because let's be honest, like, there's none of us that get off scot-free in terms of that. We've all had we all have our story to tell in terms of our experiences and how we overcame our challenges in life,
Yeah.
you know?
I mean, I've experienced, myself, help myself with purely by accident, really, is this is going way back now, that when we were doing the initial training and they were they were looking for somebody with a bit of a strange phobia. Do you know what I mean? Not the usual cats and dogs or whatever.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
just
yeah,
happened to
yeah,
mention to one of the other people, said, "Oh, I've kind of got a phobia of being around pregnant women," right? Which sounds really strange. And
yeah,
anyway, obviously, Chinese whispers. It got back, and so would you volunteer to do a session, which I did, and it was mainly regression, and I went back to an experience that I'd had within the police as a young guy, just joined 19 years old. And the first sudden death that I ever went to was, so I was 19, straight out of training school. And there's a phone call came into the police station, and the sergeant says, "Oh, this is a really good one." He grabbed me, he says, "Come with me." He said, "You won't have seen anything like this." And we went to a house not far away, sort of a 2 up, 2 down terrace house. And the sudden death was in those days, it was called a cot death of a young child, only a few months old, And of course, we get to the house, and both parents were there in absolute trauma. But we'd obviously got to make sure that there'd been, everything was correct for our reports, and to report to the coroner's office that there was, nothing out of order. And they're still in, this young child had been taken off in an ambulance to the hospital to no avail. And then we had to go to the mortuary in the hospital, and you go in. So I'm there, green as grass, 19 years old,
yeah,
and there's this tiny baby on this massive stainless steel slab in the mortuary, waiting for the post-mortem. So that was
oh no,
fairly full on.
yeah, that was, I
And
can imagine.
yeah, and that there was something obviously in my subconscious that said, "Well, I don't want any of this sort of thing." So basically avoiding, the whole children thing. If you.
Yeah, yeah. And how did the session then with yourself go? Did it get rid of
Yeah, so that was good. Yeah,
yeah,
so
okay.
it basically solved the problem, But a
Yeah,
lot of it was rooted in that experience. There were some other bits that came into it, but generally that was the clincher that really sort of
yeah,
changed my attitude, response, whatever you want to say. Yeah.
sure, sure. Because there's a root cause to everything, folks. And I do always say that, when we're born, we're not born with any habits, we're not born with any fears and phobias as such. We're not born with any behaviors, right?
Yeah.
There's no one born with a cigarette in their mouth or a fear of spiders or biting your nails.
Yeah.
It's these, when we go through traumatic events that leave an imprint, right?
Yeah.
On
They
what we
build
call,
up layer by layer by
yeah,
layer, until it becomes
exactly,
unbearable, and then
exactly,
the cork kind of pops, and you need to do something
exactly.
about it. Yeah.
And is that how you work as well too? Would you be um like have that integrated into your process to regress to the root cause of a problem and then
Um,
find a solution?
I think it's on a case by case basis. It's a process that suits some things and not others. You really
Yeah,
got to make a judgment call in the initial session and see, what's going to work, tailor it and see what's going to work for this client, to give them the best result.
Yeah. Yeah, it depends, doesn't it? It's not
Yeah.
a one size fits all. That there may be in certain instances it could be a really um,
Yeah.
really good strategy to use,
Yeah.
and others not.
And sometimes, the client will tell you straight out, they'd almost tell you what the issue is and where it comes from. And then essentially what you got to do is find a way around it for them, a coping mechanism.
Sure, sure, sure.
Yeah.
And but it can be. Do you ever have instances where you have an abreaction? Because with regression to me is it's very important to keep them in a safe space that
That's
you
it. That's what I say. You've got to make a
know,
judgment call.
yeah,
What's the issue that they're presenting with? What's the best way to get a result for them? And often regression isn't the way, but there's certain instances where it works particularly well.
sure, sure,
There's so many different protocols, different methodologies that we can use, and the things I think is not to be too fixed. You judge each one on its merits and say, yeah, this person, the best way forward for them is we can go this way, that way. Sometimes you can be quite general. There's just so much stuff going off that you need to start with, sort of to clear the wood from the trees, as it were. You need a bit more general approach, an emotional
sure,
detox to give you a clear route then to where we're going, forward. Because quite often it's not clear what the issue is. There's just so much stuff. Oh, I feel really bad about myself. I need some help, but I don't know where it's coming from, and so on and so forth. They say, right,
sure.
we're going to start with something pretty general, and then move it on from there. And then quite often after that, you can burrow down and really hit the thing that's driving it.
Yeah, because in a lot of cases, folks, when clients come to see us, the presenting issue isn't necessarily the underlying issue, right? Like, I mean, yeah, for example, like, if someone comes to see us for, say, comfort eating or, even smoking, you
Yeah,
know, can be other reasons why that it's not the smoking, it's not the comfort eating. It's, the triggers and the
yeah,
reasons why that they're actually they're engaging in these behaviors that are sabotaging their health, right?
yeah. So quite often, what they present with is a symptom
A
of
symptom, yeah, a
something
symptom.
else going off.
That's it.
So it's like, oh, I want to keep my drinking under control, blah 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 blah. Then but it's being driven by either a bad relationship or stress at work or even grief, or whatever. But the drinking is a symptom of a bigger issue.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. And you also, like, you do smoking cessation yourself in your practice?
I do, yeah. It's getting less and less
Yeah.
common.
Yeah, right.
But there's less and less people smoking,
That's right.
and particularly where I'm based as well. It's quite kind of pretty middle class sort of. The people locally, smoking locally isn't that prolific. Um, there's a certain cohort that you would notice tend to be smokers nowadays. Um,
Yeah,
it's
sure.
so you'd probably be seeing more if you. I'd be seeing more if I was based somewhere else. Some do travel to me because they don't want to go to anybody nearby. um,
Yeah,
and it's where I'm based, very handy for public transport and so on and so forth. So
yeah, yeah,
smoking in particular, I think is not. I certainly wanting to make a full time thing of it because I think it's just that, and this is one of the things
mm,
that we were we were talking about earlier. If you look at, let's say you look at movies and films from the 50s and 60s, everybody was smoking, and
yeah,
so you talk to your parents, grandparents generation, and yeah, well, everybody did it. It was the norm, and now it's not the norm because things have happened to make it not the norm. Be it legislation or it's not socially acceptable. People are more aware of the health issues. Financially, it's very heavily taxed. So, being a smoker now is, if you're a pack a day smoker, it's 6, 7 grand a year. Hobby,
yeah, absolutely. And I seen there a few years ago, I got into watching, the old 60s Rod Serling's Twilight Zone. I don't know if you've seen that, but it's a very famous TV show.
Right.
And brilliant, it really is a brilliant first day. But the iconic kind of image of that show is Rod Serling himself holding a
Yeah,
cigarette and kind
yeah,
of the
yeah,
smoke wafting up into
yeah.
the air. But
That
it
was
did,
him. It was cool.
yeah, it was cool. But did catch up with him because he did succumb to lung cancer in the mid 70s. He was pretty young. I think he was only 50.
Yeah,
But he was like seemingly a very heavy smoker. But he started off each episode, he kind of lead into each episode, and there'd always be a cigarette in his hand. And even in
yeah,
some of the episodes, he'd be advertising the whatever brand or company he'd be smoking. But you still see it a little bit around
yes,
in different TV series and that. I've seen it in the one that's pretty popular is that Stranger Things,
yeah, yeah,
and there's quite a lot of smoking in that. And I know it's kind of set back in the 80s, which is why I suppose they're trying to make it realistic, but it still is there as well as a indirect suggestion that smoking is
yeah.
cool.
But I think there's other things coming along now. Like we were talking earlier. Um, People, constantly on the phone, social
Mm.
media, this kind of thing. That okay, the smoking's been dealt with by legislation and various other things, and now something else comes and takes its place in a way. And I think down the line we're going to be seeing more and more clients where they've got issues with overuse of devices and you know, social media and the way they see the world around them and the way they think the world sees them. I think that's the next big thing that's coming towards us.
Absolutely. And do you see what's your take on the effect that all this technology, which in one way is great, the mobile phones,
Yeah,
et cetera, the impact that it is having on, I suppose, not only the society that we live in, but especially in terms of the younger people,
yeah.
our kids that are being given these devices younger and younger and younger. I was at the swimming pool, my kids there a few weeks ago, and seeing like I was shocked to how many kids kind of under 10. Like, I mean, to me, 5, 6, walking
Yeah.
around with a tablet and earphones.
Yeah.
Um, it's surreal almost to see,
I mean, I
but
know there's a lot, there's a
mm,
lot on these devices. You could be using it for reading a book. You could be using it
it
for
could be, yeah,
watching something,
yeah,
whatever. But
yeah,
I'd frequently go for a walk along there's a beach below where I live and
mm,
go on towards a park. And you'd see somebody that they're pushing a pram along, a stroller.
yeah,
Person that the father pushing the stroller has got big
yeah,
earphones on, and
yeah,
they've
yeah,
got some right, and they're listening to something or whatever. And then there's a
yeah,
baby in the stroller holding a phone or a tablet, watching a movie, and they're pushing like they're both completely disengaged from each other.
yeah,
It,
yeah,
it's very strange, and particularly here, I'd use the dart quite frequently. And at one time, and this is very recently, you'd get on, there'd be people reading a newspaper, looking at a book. There might even be a few people in the area having a chat. And you go on now, and everybody, I mean, almost 90 something percent have got
yeah.
some device right in front of them, and they're
Yeah, if
watching
you see
something.
someone wearing or reading, sorry, reading a paperback book, you kind of have to take a second glance these days. So rare.
Yeah, yeah. And scroll, and just scrolling, continuously scrolling, you'd see the ones that are scrolling. And you think, what are you looking for, really? Because it's just relentless.
Yeah,
They don't even seem to stop and look at anything. It's just scroll, scroll, scroll.
yeah,
It's and another one that I witness quite frequently. I'd be, catching the dark from Dalkey to come back home, and you'd see a row of school children, teenagers,
mm,
sitting in a row, and they're texting each other people that are in the row because you'd see a response. It's
yeah.
it's very, it's very strange. Um,
And unfortunately, it's not becoming, it is normalized, right?
yeah,
It's not even becoming normalized. It is normalized.
yeah,
And I have to make a point of when I'm at my kids sometimes to, turn off the phone and, be present when you're in someone's presence, especially family and loved ones that you want to be there present with them rather than everyone seems to be constantly distracted by on their phones you know and you can go to a cafe now and you see it, like half the people there aren't even, like, they're sitting across from each other, we're not even communicating, one's on a they're both on mobile phones, head down,
yeah.
that's a
Restaurants,
topic.
you
Yeah.
know, two people out for a meal and they photograph what the food and and then they're texting other people, oh, I'm in this restaurant eating this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Person there opposite them, not
yeah,
involved in the loop at all.
yeah, I know. And
Thing
look at
that-
it's technology, like, to me, and this is my opinion,
Mm,
like, in one way is good,
yeah.
but in another way, I mean, in many other ways, actually, that if you look at, like, society, are we evolving or devolving? Because, you
Well,
know, you see so many things that, like, I grew up in the 70s and 80s that were exciting, and there was like, it was like a color, it was in color,
yeah,
whereas now it's like more of a kind of a black and white thing. And even sport, like football, snooker, things like that, was more flair. There was more kind of like passion. There was more kind of personalities in the games.
yeah.
Whereas now it's very robotic. It's very kind of like predictable. And I
Scripted.
think that, has seeped in to society, and especially in terms of, like I said, the technology that we look at. Don't get me wrong, folks. I use it myself, so I can't hold
I
my
do.
hands up.
But
But
I think it's one of the things, who's policing it is the thing, is that,
yeah,
a lot of big tech, let's say it's become like a utility, for instance.
mm,
So these things need to be big in a way to make them work. So like a utility. So, you don't have competing water systems. You don't have two national grids that compete with each other. You don't have two railway networks. You have one and you make it work for everybody. But when you have a utility like that, you'll notice that there's a way that they're monitored. So let's say a water company, it's got to be drinking quality. You're not allowed to put sewage into the river. All these kind of
mm, mm,
regulations
yeah,
and
yeah,
ombudsman and all this kind of thing. As far as the tech industry is concerned, none of that really exists. They they really set their own rules, and when they bring, let's say, new things out, they use the general public as guinea pigs, and then if it goes a bit, wrong, they could turn around and go, "Oh, sorry, we did meant it to turn out that like that."
yeah, yeah, yeah,
There's obviously been well documented um, situations where it's gone a bit awry, and yet the tech companies that, I mean, they barely give an apology. You know, you see
sure.
the ethnic cleansing of the Rohingyas in Myanmar, and Facebook just turned around and said, "Oh well, we didn't really. That's not what we intended to happen." Yeah, but it did happen, and
Yeah,
your platform was the thing that drove it.
yeah. And I
But
think they're designed, would you agree? They're designed to be addictive,
oh yeah, most
you know.
definitely.
And
Yeah,
like when it comes to the actual mind, right,
yeah.
that we know about and how our mind works, that that monkey mind, that mind that is like,
Get a little hit every time you get a like and all this sort of thing.
exactly. And you go
Yeah.
into Facebook, it says, what are you thinking? Like what's in the moment, right? So this means like if you're, you could be experiencing different human emotions like anger, frustration, and then you're on Facebook. What are you going to do? You're going to have a rant, or and then
Yeah.
later on you'll probably regret it because when that kind of chimp kind of monkey mind gets out of control, and that's a platform for it because Facebook is full of them. It's full of people kind
Yeah.
of like giving kind of opinions and in the spur of the
Um,
moment.
and this will probably change as time moves on, but there's an imbalance in the transaction between the user and the platform that's providing it. A lot of people turn around and say, "Oh, well, these things are free. Google's free, Facebook's
Mm,
free,
mm, mm,
Instagram's
mm.
free." But then you don't need to be, too bright at maths to say, "Well, hang on a minute, yeah, you're getting that platform for free." And then you look at the value of the companies and the profits that they're making, and you say, "Well, the data that they're harvesting from everybody and rendering down to
Mhm.
use for other
Yeah,
purposes is obviously worth more than what you're getting for free." So there's an
yeah,
imbalance there. We've got to be wary of that. On a personal basis, where we have these transactions with these big, you know, dominant companies. Okay, we're getting this for free. We're getting this platform for free. We're using it for this to our own advantage. But what are they getting from us? You've always got to have that in the back of your mind.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, absolutely. And when it comes to, the AI, the chat GPT as well, and I've been reflecting on my use of that a lot lately, actually. And I know, look, there's pros and cons,
yeah.
as our colleague Stephen McGill will tell us, and he's right.
Oh, I mean,
There's no doubt about that. And it's if used with respect and in the right way, it's a invaluable resource if you're in a business,
yeah,
running a business, but also just to be careful that and it's good to be mindful of it, that one thing that it cannot replicate is the human touch. So, for
Yes.
example, like if if I get inquiries, and as we get inquiries as hypnotherapists, it can be kind of so easy to use like ChatGPT to give you the perfect response, but it sucks all the humanity out of it. It sucks. I mean, I remember hearing recently that the Queen, the band Queen,
Yes.
their records, their albums were being remixed and remastered, right? And some of the Queen fans were very unhappy, and so they should
Yeah.
be when they used AI to autotune basically Freddie Mercury's voice.
Yeah.
And there's a guy on YouTube that has a whole channel dedicated to pointing out all of the differences between the original recordings, not just Queen, but
Yeah.
all of the remixes and remasters these days. That they take all the imperfections out of the recordings and the music. But his argument is, and I'd be very much aligned with that, is that by doing so, you're removing like the human emotion, what made it, like that famous quiver in Freddie Mercury's voice, for example, that made it so good, is
Yeah.
now not there anymore because, they've the perfection isn't necessarily,
Find out. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
I think as far as big, the tech's concerned, going down the road, is I think we're going to see pressure from outside coming in. You see it now with certain schools banning phones in schools and such like, and
Right.
it'll go a bit the way like smoking, that it becomes socially acceptable, unacceptable to have these devices in certain places,
So
and then
we'll be looking back in 56 years time, and looking back going,
like we do
what
on
was that all?
smokers now. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
There does come a time when even these big corporations that people think that nobody can control, actually they do pull into line through via you can see, let's say the car industry, eventually they were forced into making more economical cars that were safer and so on and so forth from outside pressures. They wouldn't have done it voluntarily. White goods, banning CFCs in fridges and things like that, and they had to find a new way around the problem. And so these things do change over a period of time. And I think where tech's concerned, from the outside, there's going to be pressure saying, look, okay, these devices are very useful, but you don't really want to have it in the clutch of your hand 24 hours a day.
Mm,
And there's also,
mm.
well, from an ethical point of view, you can see pressure from inside coming out, more and more whistleblowers coming forward and saying, look, this is what's happening within these platforms. It's not as hunky-dory
Mm,
as it's
mm.
made out to be.
Sure, sure. And do you think that like the use of the mobile phones and the technologies we're talking about, I mean, we've kind of touched on this before we come on here, but
Yeah.
it's having an impact on our younger generation in terms of stress and anxiety and not being able to properly or effectively communicate
No,
the world around them, you
yeah,
know? And we see that, and that's coming in, we see that in our office, don't we?
yeah. Yeah, there's also, it's having a big effect. I mean, there was one article I read, and there's a group of children, and they were watching some particular sort of cartoon, and these children were ending up with like American accents because they were watching so many of these American cartoons.
Yeah,
It was affecting their language. One other thing I've noticed
crazy.
is if I do a fairly formal sort of contract with my clients, and because they're so, particularly the younger, and when I say younger, I'm on about anybody under about the age of 30. They're
Hmm.
so used to using keyboards for communicating, be it email or any kind of writing, that
Mm.
if you ask them to sign their own name and fill something, the date in or something, the standard of the handwriting is
Yeah, I know.
horrendous. I mean,
Yeah,
it's like barely doing joint, it's stuff that we did at school when we were sort of 6 and 7. It's barely joined together. And you're
yeah,
thinking, wow, that is,
I
that's a big
know.
change. Whether it's
Absolutely.
good
And
or bad,
like, it's so
I don't want to
easy to,
make a judgment, but
yeah, but it's so easy to send an email. And the problem is that we know, like, when it comes to communication, folks, like body language and tone of voice, believe it or not, is 93% of
mm,
communication. So what we're looking at
yeah,
when it comes to text messages and even email is the 7%, the words that are there. And a lot of it comes back to how we are feeling in that moment. And when we read an email, I mean, if we're in a fantastic mood, we're going to perceive it in a different way, right? If we're feeling like crap, we could read the exact same thing and take it a different way. And I find that, again, it goes back to the human touch. I have a bunch of letters there that were written to me, handwritten by clients that I helped. And it's really something that if the place went on fire, that'd be the first things
yeah,
they'd grab because like they're really meaningful.
yeah,
And because I have that personal touch that like, when you like write a letter, you're putting more into it, like you're putting more emotion into it. And depending on,
yeah.
it's an art in itself. And I think
I
it's
have
sad.
letters, from
Yeah.
in the mid 1980s when I lived abroad, and used to get these blue airmail folded up letters because it was so expensive to make a phone call. I was living in Bermuda at the time, and
Yeah. Yeah.
I've still got those, and a lot of them are from people long since deceased. So it's almost like having a little piece of them that you can touch. Handwritten letter,
Yeah.
what's happening right back to them. So that's kind of all disappearing. And the other thing
Yeah.
I've noticed, another trend as well, is wherever you go, everything is being photographed and filmed.
Yeah.
Seems like nothing's complete without it being photographed and filmed.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
there's got to be a bit of a 1984-ish edge to that somewhere. That
yeah,
everything, everything's being recorded and photographed, and it's very nice, some of it. But it's got to this. I think it's got to the stage where it can be a bit intrusive.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I started doing hypnotherapy, folks, 15 years ago when the world, believe it or not, was a simpler place, Mark, back then.
Yeah,
Because when I started out, I remember when I qualified from the NGH, the National Guild of Hypnotists in 2010, like all I had really was a website
yeah,
and brochures. Somebody will just grab them for you just to show you. And I still have, I got a couple of thousand of them and these and leaflets, which is like a few testimonials on the back and, you know, what services you kind of provide. And apart from that, like I might have done a few talks maybe at a health fair or a library or, and all that has kind of disappeared a little bit as well. I mean, now it's all like there's a lot of, I won't say pressure, but to come along to the modern world that we live in. I mean, I'm 52
yeah,
and I do find it a challenge to, what all the social media platforms that you need to be making a video every day, that you need to be on like, there's Facebook, Instagram, TikTok,
yeah.
like God knows what else, that you need to be putting yourself out there because unfortunately, again, like when I was starting out, like you might have an article printed in the paper, in the local paper, which is fantastic. But who reads the local papers now? I mean, the viewing compared to back then is like minuscule. So,
Everything, everything's very fluid. Even let's say the Facebook and the Google that we experience in the early 2000s when they first really took hold. The first iPhone was only 2007.
Yeah.
In the terms of human existence, we're only a very short distance into this, and yet the
Yeah. Yeah.
change is massive.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And we're going to see the impact on that like more and more and more. But that's, I
yeah,
think, something that we as like hypnotherapists and with the skills that we have, that's where we can come in and we can help
yeah,
to take away maybe some of that stress and anxiety that's going to be the residual
yeah,
effect of using this technology.
yeah,
But look, Mark, I suppose I've one eye on the time, and
yeah.
time has flown by. I really enjoyed the chat, the discussion, and thanks a million for coming on. So just before you sign off, and I ask all my guests the same thing, not to put you on the spot here or anything, but have you any words of wisdom you would like to share with myself and my audience before you sign off here today? Any parting
Words of
words?
wisdom. It is a difficult one. I would say
Turn off your
awareness.
mobile phone now and again.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
yeah, but there are little habits like that. Being
Yeah,
aware
yeah, yeah.
of yourself. Almost doing like now and again doing a little audit, a self audit. Where am I? Where am I going? How are things affecting me? Do I need to change anything? You know, just keeping on an audit of yourself as opposed to relying on input from elsewhere.
Yeah,
So a long look in the mirror, let's say, do a self-assessment as opposed to an assessment that's done from outside.
sure. We're not necessarily looking for that external validation, but maybe taking some time out, a walk, as you said, along the beach or, to clear the head. And
Yeah,
that's proven, folks, that like if we're wherever, it could be the beach, a garden, out in nature, that's when we
yeah,
can kind of look at the bigger picture and we can make better choices because we have more clarity, don't we, of mind.
yeah, yeah.
So, Mark, thanks a million for coming on. Really
Hey,
appreciate it. Would you like to give your website and details?
oh, geez.
What's your website address?
It's dalkeyhypnotherapy.ie.
Okay, good
Yeah.
stuff. So, if anyone out there wants to contact you, what would be the best way to
Yeah,
do it?
on there, there's a contact form, there's an email address, there's a phone number, and whichever way suits them.
Good stuff. Mark, it's been a pleasure. You look after yourself, so we'll be in touch.
Yep. Thank you very much for having me.
You're very welcome. Take care, mate. Okay,
Thanks a lot.
folks, it's that time again to say goodbye. And it's great to be back, really is. And to have these discussions. As you know, the Power Within podcast has on inspiring people with inspiring stories. And I like to keep it informal, like to keep it just like a chat, a formal chat, and see where the conversation takes us. As today, I think we've had a really interesting discussion, and I hope you've enjoyed it too. I've certainly enjoyed it. So, folks, until next time, be good to yourselves, be good to each other, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Power Within podcast. Take care, folks.